Our fourth Cabot show this season is Philip Glass's Hydrogen Jukebox. This is a show I've been really excited about for a long time, and for years I've wanted to do it with my company in Houston. Unfortunately, we just never had the resources to pull it off in a way that would be spectacular, and luckily at the Skylight we do. It's a show that talks about that 1950s and 60s revolution. Free love, that personal freedom again, but kind of on a more young, hippie stage. The show takes the poetry and the writings of Allen Ginsberg and the music of Philip Glass. In fact, the two directly collaborated together to build the show. It's one that's very episodic in a way that creates drama, but doesn't necessarily have a direct plot. So you have that kind of hazed 60s scene-by-scene moment, and you fall in love with these characters who kind of are a Philip Glass version of the Village People. We have a waitress and a policeman, and so kind of representational American characters, and they create this amazingly dramatic show. And all the while you have this narrated poetry of Allen Ginsberg, excerpts from Howl, and those incredible beat poet moments, and you'll hear everything from Eastern religion represented and that kind of old school 60s Hare Krishna kind of vibe, all the way to moments with gas masks, and it takes on pretty much every kind of moment in that 1950s, 60s era, and I think in a really incredible way.
Sure, I'm Ted Huffman. I'm the director of Hydrogen Jukebox. I'm originally from New York. I live in London, and I'm a theater and opera director. I've had the music and theater bug ever since I was really little. I started singing in a choir when I was 7 years old, and then when I was 12 I did my first Broadway show, so I was in The Sound of Music, playing Kurt for quite a while, doing 8 shows a week. And then I did more performances both as an actor and singer, and that led me to directing eventually. I'm really excited. I think we have a great project and a great team. So it's my first time to Milwaukee, and it's such a beautiful theater. It's perfect for this piece, which is, you really need to be able to see the performers and be up close. And it's interesting because Philip Glass writes in a very lyrical way for the voice, even though he's writing using this poetry of Ginsberg, which is very modern. So I think it'll be a really nice piece in this theater. So Hydrogen Jukebox is I think unique among all the shows that I've ever worked on, because there's no real narrative, although Ginsberg said of his poetry that if you take all of his poetry together, that's his biography. So in a sense, and we're going to bring that out in the production, in a sense, you do get a through line of this person's life and sort of the spiritual and intellectual development that he goes through, but at the same time it's very episodic, and so you jump around from New York to India, to Paris, to all these places that he was going, to San Francisco, and you jump around not only location-wise, but you jump around within sort of types of scenes. So one scene might be a realistic scene between him and someone in his family that he's describing in his poetry, and the next scene is a really wild, poetic conversation about spiritual realms. So in that sense, the locations are constantly in flux, and so we've come up with a design for it which relies heavily on projections. And one of the great things about projections is that they don't weigh anything, so you can move them really quickly, and so the production is really fast moving, and like I said, it goes through so many places and so many different states of mind, all together. So one element of how we're planning to build the show is a deep interaction between performers and the design, and again it's made possible because we're using video design for so much of the visual world that we're creating. So rather than the video acting as background or as a more traditional set might act, it's something that the characters will interact with, and real interaction in the sense that if a character does something then the video reacts, or if the video makes a gesture, the characters react, and it's a really exciting thing that is only possible now that we have this new technology. But I think it lends itself really well to this poetic work, because again, the poetry jumps so quickly between places and times and states of being that you have that fluidity because of video. Well, I think that the amazing thing about this work is that Ginsberg tackles a lot of the social issues of his day, which are not all that different than the social issues of our day. So, you know, he was such a prophet in that sense, and he was really one of the, you know, strongest and first voices speaking out on a variety of issues, from, you know, the working against the, you know, the war industrial complex, working for gay rights. So that, and throughout his life, because his life was a real reflection of his beliefs. So, you know, he lived in a very simple way, and, you know, bought his clothes at a thrift shop, and adhered to these Buddhist principles that you'll hear a lot about in the opera. And he spent his life, you know, protesting things that he either disagreed with, or protesting for things he believed in. And it's a really radical and amazing example of how to live one's life, I think. So he did it with the spoken word, because that was his way, and his training, and what he could bring to the movement. But I think he also gives us, again, a very good example of someone who was unafraid to speak his voice, and he understood, you know, and had great conviction about what was right in our world and what wasn't right, and that, you know, we were all trapped to a certain degree within a society that was imperfect, and needed to examine itself, and that's what he did. Is he asked us all to examine the society, and I think that, you know, nowadays we have, you know, this NSA scandal breaking now, and we have Russia saying that, you know, gay people can't speak out legally, and so you have, again, all these things which are totally relevant, and this really the same issues that he was dealing with. So I think it will speak very directly, actually, in a way that, you know, sometimes the standard repertoire can't speak to us, because they weren't, you know, wrestling with those same issues. As I understand it, you know, Philip Glass and Ginsberg, they were both part of, you know, the New York downtown. Granted, slightly different generations, but I'm sure they had a lot of interaction in the, you know, circles they moved, and apparently this work was originally created for Ginsberg to read and for Glass to play piano, and so it was envisioned more as a concert piece, but that's probably too grand. It was envisioned as something that they could perform together in a bar, or, you know, in a concert hall if necessary. So because of that, it's a very text-heavy piece, and one of our excitements and challenges was figuring out how to, you know, get the text across without being too heavy-handed about, you know, duplicating the imagery that he uses. And I think we're using Philip Glass's work as our starting point, because Glass works in these very small motifs that he repeats, and there's something about that works so well with the maximalist approach of Ginsberg's poetry. So for us, you know, we're kind of working in between the two of them. So sometimes making a very simple visual gesture, which we will then just repeat, and playing with form in that way. And then at other times, you know, we do want to spell something out, because, you know, especially in some of the political songs, there's really no choice, that you have to, you know, talk about what is going on in the poetry, and you know, in the case of the Iran-Contra affair, he writes, you know, a very impassioned poem about that, and about the hypocrisy, and about, you know, the levels of corruption of government. So I think, you know, in those cases we have to tackle it head on. So and so, yeah, it's interesting finding that balance between those things. I mean, Glass's music is hypnotic in that way, and both of them are quite interested in Eastern philosophy and in mantras and chanting. So even though there isn't necessarily chanting in this piece, both of their works are infused with lots of repetition that you would find in chanting, and they have that quality of an Eastern sensibility, so Buddhist or what have you. Sure, I think this is, you know, probably the perfect piece to be talking to put into a season about freedom and revolution. Ginsberg was, again, at the forefront of the revolution that happened, in the social revolution that happened in the 1960s. So all of those things from you know, gay rights to the civil rights era, women's liberation. He was all, you know, part and parcel of that group, and very influential among all the intellectuals who were really pushing for those changes to be made in our country. And he didn't stop there. You know, he kept on being very political well through the 80s, and the piece starts sometime in the 1950s and takes us through the 80s. So we get to see how, you know, he continues to react, and it wasn't, you know, even after most of the world had, you know, traded their you know, 1960s hippie wear for corporate suits. You know, Ginsberg was there making the points in the same way that he was in the 60s. So I think this is an amazing piece. You start off with some of the best poetry written in the 20th century, and then you add really wonderful, exciting, and sometimes hypnotic music. And what we're hoping to do with that is make a corresponding visual world, which is hypnotic and exciting, and, you know, sometimes heartbreaking and other times exhilarating, and to take you through the experience of Allen Ginsberg, because that's what this piece is. He's writing from his heart, and he's really you know, exposing what he is experiencing as he goes through this very tumultuous period of American history. So I think when you come to this show, you're going to feel like you really go through something. It's 2 hours of really exciting entertainment, but the kind of entertainment that, you know, you have to think about.